We are here today talking about all things sport welfare officer style and safeguarding style, all relating to British orienteering, the sport of orienteering, and our clubs and members within it. The whole point of this podcast is to get across the fantastic work that the sport welfare officers do across the country with clubs, members, volunteers, and how our clubs at British Orienteering can tap into the great work that's going on as well. So we'll do some quick introductions. Myself, I am the partnerships manager for British Orienteering. I work in a variety of kind of different ways for the sport, whether that's sponsorship with the performance squad, wider sponsorship for the membership, working with active and local partnerships, school sports partnerships, universities, further education, you name it. If you want to go around and introduce ourselves and the role that you have, and probably the area that you work in as well.
I'll go first. My name is Chris Timmins. I am the Sport Welfare Officer for Sport Birmingham, covering Birmingham areas, and I'll pass on to Rich.
Hi, my name is Richard Steele. I'm one of 3 sport welfare managers based in the Active Partnership Rise North East, up in the northeast of England, from Northumberland, County Durham, Tyne and Wear, just onto the borders of Tees Valley area. And over to Measha.
Hi there, I'm Measha. I'm the Sport Welfare Officer for West Yorkshire. I'm based at Yorkshire Sport Foundation, and our cluster features Yorkshire and the Humber. So we're part of a team covering that region.
Thanks, guys. And as I said, this is all information that hopefully our clubs can take on board, regardless of where they are located across the country. And obviously, even if your area of your county wasn't mentioned just then, there are sport welfare officers that cover every inch of the country as well, which are more than willing to help out. And we've had lots of really useful conversations ourselves as an organisation with the Sport Welfare Network team recently as well. So what we're going to do is we're just going to try and cover a few Q&As and a few kind of covering bases and any kind of questions that you might have in the mind about their roles or ways that they can help on a localised basis for you. So first of all, what are sport welfare officers? Who are you and how did it come about?
So the Sports Welfare Officer Network, it's been created collaboratively with Sport England, Active Partnerships, National Governing Bodies in Sport, the Child Protection in Sport Unit, which is the sporting arm of the NSPCC, and the Ancraft Trust, who take a sort of lead role around adult safeguarding. And it's currently funded by Sport England with investment through the National Lottery. So why is the network being introduced? Well, first of all, it feeds into Sport England's current strategy, uniting the movement, where children and young people can feel and are safe when being active. But it's also been a major direct recommendation from the White Review. This was a review conducted into British gymnastics back in 2022, looking into allegations of abuse, and it found that gymnastic wellbeing and welfare had not always been at the centre of British gymnastics culture, with an over-reliance and a sort of lack of support for club welfare officers. So, and more recently, you've had also things like the Sheldon Review into football, and Swim England's Heart of Aquatics report, which has looked at issues of abuse and pool practice. So in response to this, a professional network of around, I think there's around 63 of us that have been created around the country. We're employed in 43 different active partnerships. So there's coverage right across England to support all clubs at a local level. This direct recommendation, it's there to work with national governing bodies, local clubs, local welfare officers and volunteers, just to sort of add that extra capacity and expertise to any existing safeguarding work that's already going on. But we're there also to promote good practice and safe sport across all sports, not just in gymnastics. The network's been formed from a wide range of individuals from a wide breadth of diverse and professional backgrounds. And as a result, we've got extensive knowledge of safeguarding welfare, both within and beyond sport. And we're trying to use this to develop safer, more inclusive cultures across all sporting environments like orienteering, where everyone can take part and enjoy the benefits of sport in a safe environment.
Perfect. I think you summed that up perfectly then. So moving on from that, then obviously, like, this is new ground for orienteering and orienteering clubs, and maybe some of our membership weren't aware that you existed, hence the whole point of the podcast and trying to get a bit more information out of there. What examples of support have you provided in other sports?
Yeah, so we appreciate that a lot of sports clubs are different, and we've really focused on tailoring our support to meet each one of those sports' unique needs. So a couple of examples. In judo, one of our teams supported the introduction of junior welfare officers, and that was helping to ensure that young people have a peer voice in safeguarding. And we also helped clubs create welcome videos, which has been really useful, especially to new members who might be quite nervous about joining, wondering what to expect. And it also makes joining a club feel more inclusive and reassuring. In boxing, we've worked on youth voice collaboration videos, giving young athletes a platform to share their experiences. And also within Swim England, we've provided bespoke training, which is one of our offers. So within that, there's been active bystander workshops and youth mental health sessions, all aimed at developing safer and supportive club cultures. So it's not just youth, which I've touched on, it's also adult as well. So that whole holistic view of supporting all members and backgrounds of the club. We've also supported clubs with equality, diversity and inclusion, and helping create accessible environments that everybody's welcome. And also our regional club development forums, some of us call them Sport Welfare Connects. We do, but they've got different names regionally, but they're all about bringing club welfare officers together to share practice. They play a huge role within the clubs and welcoming new members and making old members feel welcome and keep on enjoying the sport as well. So we like to strengthen the relationships between clubs and also the local safeguarding partnerships as well, so they're not separate. So they know exactly where to go for advice, guidance, and extra support, as well as knowing that they can go to their NGB safeguarding team too if they're affiliated.
Yeah, and I think an important thing, really, you touched on it there for me, is that I think sometimes people connect the word safeguarding to just kind of junior and children's participation, don't they? And I think that's probably a big misconception that you're trying to get across there.
Yeah.
So what would you say, as sport welfare officers, would have been like the biggest safeguarding or welfare challenges that you're finding in the sport at the moment?
So there's sort of two main ones really that have sort of were highlighted probably quite early on, and that was the capacity of safeguarding itself. People were sort of felt being maybe isolated, maybe within their clubs or committees, or even potentially across NGBs. Just the capacity of it is almost a whole role in itself. Some clubs operate where it might be a dual role, which isn't the best practice that we want ideally. So we're sort of trying to work with clubs to sort of find better solutions. And as Measha mentioned, is each club, each sport's a little bit different. So it's a case of how we can adapt and support them through that. And also the other thing is that the turnover. Generally, a club welfare officer is a very short turnaround. It's probably less than like a year or 18 months, something like that. If someone's in the role longer than that, then it's very lucky. So those are the two that were things around that. And then the stigma around safeguarding, a little bit more around just the word. It seems to frighten people almost to what's seen and heard in the papers or in the media, rather than actually it's the preventive side as well, about those smaller things that sort of reduce the risk, and anything that's come from an inquest because of something that's been quite a tragic sort of case, it is usually because the smaller things got missed or not sort of maybe swept under the carpet or just not followed up on. So we want to ensure that doesn't happen, and we have safer venues, safer clubs, safer for participants to enjoy themselves. So they're sort of the main bulk, and another thing that's come to light is parents' awareness. I think trying to be more visible, whether that's online, whether that's notice boards, being on the ground, to help parents to realise that there's a safeguarding lead within clubs, and there is somewhere to support that. It's been often the case that parents aren't aware, so it's good to have all these people to potentially, if parents don't know where to go, then it's a little bit, what's the point of having them in a way?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
But yeah, no, a question for us to ask you is, what good safeguarding practices have you seen at British Orienteering?
I think across the sport, I think, you know, hoping not to tempt fate, but I think the way that the sport is kind of delivered lends itself to kind of safeguarding always in the forefront of kind of event officials' minds. And, you know, aside from that, clubs, you know, all clubs to be affiliated have to have a club welfare officer, which is, you know, in charge of safeguarding and ensuring all of the policies are followed. Like just the very basics of the sport in terms of the mapping and the rules to follow for the event are kind of like really robustly run. So speaking for anybody that's not used to the sport, who might be kind of listening into this, orienteering courses and orienteering events quite often and very often have a set of different courses within them that are all different distance and difficulties. And if a course is designed for a junior or a family course, for example, they follow certain rules within them in terms of planning. So such as like not being able to kind of like go near water courses or cross water courses, or courses have to be crossed over bridges. If it's like an urban race, juniors up until a certain age are not allowed to cross roads, and it has to be within parkland, for example. And the white course and the yellow course, which are the very tiniest of courses, so the white would be the youngest, the yellow would be kind of like key stage 1, key stage 2 age. The way that those courses are planned are that they are kept within a very specific area. The juniors that are taking part can see the checkpoints from, you know, the previous checkpoint that they're in. So just the very basis of that within the sport is kind of like an internal safeguarding that courses need to be planned to that. But you've got like other things such as, you know, you've got dynamic kind of safeguarding and risk assessments on the day. There was an event last year where Lisa Ware from the CPSU had come to an event just to see how clubs were running an event, and it just so happened that it was absolutely biblical rain that had been raining all day before, and it had carried on raining. And what had happened on the day was the planner had gone out and checked all of the courses, and the very youngest course that was offered, which was a yellow course at the time, they literally scrapped 3 or 4 of the checkpoints of the controls live on the morning because they were simply too dangerous, or, you know, like next to fast flowing water that had come overnight kind of thing. So it was great to see that kind of like procedure in place where, you know, and all of the maps have been printed, don't get me wrong, but it was just a case of volunteers like scrubbing out the crosses and making sure that there was notices at the start. And so there's kind of like a dynamic kind of safeguarding and risk assessment right up until people start. And even when people start and they come back to download and they come back to kind of speaking to us and everything, they will quite often say, you know, if there's something they miss, or, you know, if there's a control that's not quite in the right place, or you know, so there's that continual kind of like discussion that goes on. And I guess and maybe not touching more so on the safeguarding, but I guess it is really, but the way that we run the sport as well is that we have recording boxes at every checkpoint, so that even at the start, if someone starts, you always have to punch, we call it punch the start box. And what we're able to do pretty much straight away is interrogate that start box and see who has started, who's out on the course, who hasn't finished. So we'll be able to see from the finish as well. So there's that kind of like always live kind of dynamic that we're able to see, you know, who's still out on the course, when they started. And of course, with the rise of the kind of pre-entry systems that 99.9% of our clubs sign up to now is that we as clubs and event officials have back access to all of the data in terms of any medical history that we need to know, emergency contact details, telephone details, etc., at hand as well. So there are, great things that go on within sport, but and the great thing about the sport as well, probably compared to a lot of different sports, is that it's a generational sport, and you can have 4 generations, and we often do have 4 generations of families that are taking part all within the same event. And that's not something that you'd necessarily see at a football match, because it's obviously, parents stood on the sidelines or adults playing and kids playing in the sandpit next to them, because there's so many different courses that go on in an orienteering event that cater for different age categories and different levels of fitness and experience. It's a case of that, the children can take part in the course, the dad can take part in the course, the mum might take part in a different course. We encourage, and shadowing is allowed for juniors as well, so parents are allowed to shadow. So just simple things like that, really, that, and I'll allude to it with a question that I'll throw back to you in a second, is that our sport is quite unique in its nature, but there are kind of like implementations within events that go on as well that we do try and make it as safe as we possibly can.
No, brilliant. Yeah, I really like the examples there, and particularly the one adapting sort of a dynamic risk assessment sort of on the day, and being able to adapt to the situations, and with the complex sort of style, how obviously you got multiple courses on at the same time. So sounds like some really good stuff out there, which is being led by clubs, and maybe hopefully in the next part we'll just sort of give them some extra ideas, or maybe some new sort of clubs who are still sort of in that early phase, and how we can sort of bring them up to speed, and ensure there's obviously more British orienteering clubs that running at the sort of the levels that can be shown, and with the right support from yourselves, that it can continue to do that.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously that's our aim. We want, a happy sport, but ultimately it's got to be a safe sport first and foremost, and I guess that kind of like leads me on to the next question. Like, and I know we touched about this when we've talked about it previously, but orienteering is such a different sport. It's not a contained sport as such, like you're playing football on a football pitch, or hockey on a hockey pitch, or in a squash court. There isn't, and that's the beauty of the sport, there isn't a set route, and sometimes people do go off the map, and we don't have a clubhouse. We're not the standardized kind of sport. So how can you guys offer support to clubs where it is quite a unique sport, and there are different challenges that maybe like a tennis club or a football club doesn't have to kind of think about?
Yeah, well, so yeah, one way is, again, with no sort of set location or clubhouse, is what's worked really well with one, actually it was a Rounders club. They used like an introduction pack to sort of bring in like sort of the culture and understanding the sort of, not the safeguarding policy as such, because it can be quite wordy, but the key elements that they need to do. So like the flow chart of like recording and reporting system, who's the contact details of the club welfare officer, and that and also sort of the links to sort of being insured through England Rounders. So it had all this, and even the map of how to get to the venue. So it was a really useful way for anyone who's maybe feeling a bit apprehensive, anxious on the new time. It just sort of settles the nerves a little bit, but also provides the key information, what's expected of them, almost like a code of conduct, which was sort of emailed out, and they had to sign it. So it shows that you've read it, you've signed it, you agree to sort of how it's run. So I think that's a really key way of how to sort of ensure that message can still get across there, with safeguarding and all the bits about your club from the start. And other things is communication platforms as well. I can imagine that if there's no set location, you don't have a notice board or a space just to put on these things. And so it's ensuring that the communication platforms are safe. So Spond is quite a good one, and that again, when it's a mix of junior and adults, that the appropriate protocols are put in place where if someone is under 18 in the group of an adult, that actually the parents are in that as well. But I can imagine they're very maybe similar or in terms of ages when they're doing a course anyway, and parents will be sort of the main point of contact on that one. But I think those are just and it's another messaging platform where you can send out, or this is the new club welfare officer, or this is sort of updates as well, whereas other sort of platforms can maybe be a little bit messy and thinking about that platform and Respond being a free platform as well, it's a really useful way to sort of keep everyone involved but also you can sort of send messages all in one go across your different groups that you might have. So now I think that's sort of a couple of ways of how those sort of clubs can operate, or how British orienteering clubs can operate without the clubhouse or sort of a set location. Go on, sorry.
No, I was just going to add into that, like it's great with Spond. We are having a bit of a webinar on Spond in our development conference in January, because we're just hearing good things about it in terms of kind of like standardizing communications and everything. So I'm really glad you've mentioned that. Moving on to recruiting, maintaining volunteers, as probably with any sport, that's one of our kind of biggest burnout is, keeping the volunteers, making sure that the volunteers are up to standard, and following all of the right protocols, etc. Is there any kind of advice you can share to clubs regarding this?
I mean, absolutely. Volunteers, they're literally the beating heart of our sports clubs, and without them, many of the clubs wouldn't even exist. We've really tried to promote a culture where volunteers feel valued and appreciated, and it starts with recognition. So what we've really found helps retaining them is recognising the hard work that they do, whether that's through shout-outs, regular shout-outs, and also through that we actually did an online video, some sessions online for rounders, and that really talked about where they can find resources, and making sure that they're accessible, maybe on your website, different things that can help them with the work of being a volunteer, and how they can make others feel welcome as well. So we did that for rounders, and we've also signposted clubs to platforms like the Birmingham Voluntary Service Council, which is Birmingham based, and it helps those clubs advertise for volunteers locally, and that kind of visibility makes a huge difference. Some clubs have also tapped into Buddle resources for creative ideas. I mean, there's so much support out there, but a lot of clubs thinking, where do I find it? So we're often signposting to different organisations that provide a wealth of tools for volunteers, for coaches, for anyone who's got a lead within a club, even for community members. But there's lots of different resources out there that we're happy to share with clubs. And also giving them a space to share practice and also learn from other people as well. For example, Wiltshire, there was a local tennis club where a volunteer delivered an online session with sharing their good practice. And that club started with just 2 volunteers and now has 20. And they even went on to win an award for the best volunteer contribution. So again, recognition and just the power of them sharing what they're doing has inspired other people, and now there's a lot more people supporting within their clubs, and we've also seen the power of community connections, linking in with local cafes, community groups, and also organisations to hold taster sessions for collaboration events, and these not only attract new volunteers, but they also build lasting relationships within the community. So yeah, a couple of things there.
Yeah, all I'm hearing there is like appreciation, isn't it? And it's like, everyone's giving up time, aren't they, to do it, and it's that just simple thank yous, they help, don't they? No, it's really useful. And I think that's probably the biggest kind of issues that we have in clubs at the moment, thankfully, because it's not a wider kind of more serious issue. But on the other hand, it is a massive issue because, as you say, volunteers are the heartbeat of every single sports club, regardless of what sport across the country. So it's how we can attract them, keep them, and more importantly, keep them happy, really. Thank you for that. So obviously our sport, as I said, reaches across generations, and everyone takes part on the same area, and it might be different courses, but they're kind of like crossing each other's paths. But are there any kind of suggestions for creating a greater connection between the younger and older participants? Because we're all taking part in the same events, but we might just be kind of ships in the night maybe sometimes.
I think Measha's probably touched on this a little bit. As Sport Welfare Officer Network, we're probably in a very fortunate position to work with many professional bodies, a lot of volunteer bodies across local communities throughout England, to share a wealth of insight and opportunities, such as specific events that are going on that can help sort of deepen those connections between the different generations, whether this can be informal social events in your orienteering club or competitions with mixed age teams that could be used to build a rapport between the different age groups. Perhaps it could be sort of skill swap days where you've got those more experienced, mature members of the club that could come across and teach children and young people a skill, and vice versa. I'm not technologically advanced, I wouldn't have said, but things you can pick up from young people as well, I think, to swap those skills, potentially under parental supervision, can help develop those relationships. Other opportunities may centre around developing those more inclusive cultures in the club, where connections between those different generations can be made through maybe sort of family-based campaigns like Easter egg hunts, or adapted orienteering courses, Christmas bonanzas or quizzes, just to get families and members of varying ages to work together. I think it's to stress there that we are a network across all of England and we share information all the time. We're working with a lot of clubs from all different areas, and our job, and we really want to pass on, collect that good practice and bring those ideas that might be useful and bespoke to your club. So please ask us to come out, even if you just want those informal opportunities.
Yeah, I love the sound of like the skill swap kind of thing. I think probably, our clubs, that we're certainly moving with the times and we're certainly massively improving, but I think there's still work to do probably on our social media end and kind of imagery and explanation. And I just think that obviously ties into the younger generation and probably, their skill set. But at the same time, the older generation probably have got the experience in orienteering as a sport, and it's kind of like, teaching the skills of the sport, but utilizing the youngsters to teach probably the people in charge of social media and kind of stuff for the club, how to make interesting content and get on TikTok, which I still don't know how to do. So, I think that's a real kind of easy win, I think, within kind of situations. And, it makes each other feel appreciated, doesn't it? And that they've each got a role within the club, whether they feel it at the moment or not. Kind of connected. We are a sport that's, as we're talking about across all generations, but we are a sport as well that's keen to drive our junior membership and raise kind of like more juniors into the sport. And we appreciate that, we're competing with gymnastic lessons and dance lessons and piano lessons and football and rugby and everything. So is there any advice there for creating, attracting more juniors into the sport?
Yeah, I think there's I think that not everyone might be attracted to those sports you mentioned, whether that's dance, football, and we want to ensure that being physically active doesn't have to be running a marathon, being really strenuous, playing a 90-minute football game, and those sort of things, but actually being out in nature and those sort of things which might appeal to others more. But it's bringing that sense of, is it their club a little bit more? Maybe there's that perception of British or an orienteering club is for adults. So maybe having a youth voice part sort of section where the voice is being heard, whether that's experimenting new ways of doing a course or adding new things or bringing sort of new ideas and fresh ideas to sort of change sort of how things work a little bit. And again, one orienteering club who operates the youth voice will get different ideas to another one because the people's skill sets and sort of passions work differently. So, and then that's how you start sort of fostering all these unique ideas, and so that sounds brilliant, which then can maybe get implemented across the board, across up and down the country. So I think that youth voice, where they can sort of have that power to sort of shape how orienteering works within the club, can be a really, really powerful way of bringing that to life. And other things is connecting with like-minded organisations. So you've got scouts and guide groups, who again, they will have quite a few activities that will be similar to orienteering, around compass reading, map reading, and sort of tying knots and all those type of skills, that actually working with those to sort of bring those on board. And then the families, which will just sort of grow the members of those clubs, and sort of almost then just it will take off, and everyone's sort of working together and collaborating in that way. And away from here, me and Rich were talking about the school system as well. Is can we get them in the secondary schools? Just because maybe Rich could expand on this. Is actually it's an option at PE GCSE. Rich,
I can jump in there, Chris, if you want. That's fine. I think it's probably key to sort of point out that in a lot of the active partnerships, we do have links with the children and young people's teams, who do a lot of work within the primary and secondary schools. And we could sort of get involved, help facilitate these links to develop that greater interest in orienteering schools and help establish the links with the local clubs. As I say, I come from a teaching background, and I know, while I was there just before I took up this role, we developed strong links with the local orienteering club. The GCSE sort of assessments have changed, different criteria have come in, so we actively looked, and PE teachers will be actively looking for different activities, different sports where they can get students involved, and we got them involved in GCSE PE practical assessments, and the students loved it. So it was initially with 10, 11 students, so 15, 16-year-olds who did that, got involved. Some of them continued it and practiced within clubs outside of school after that. And then because of the success of that, we introduced it into year 7 as part of the curriculum, as they look to broaden sort of cross-curricular links across the whole curriculum. So it developed sort of both leadership skills and fun team building activities. And as a result, again, we had some younger students that took up that interest in the club outside. And I think it's just, they hadn't really heard about orienteering before, and they didn't really know what it entailed. So I think those links, to raise awareness, we could help facilitate those in schools and sort of help develop the sport as a whole and your individual clubs.
Yeah, and I think that's massive. And I think probably, being honest, our clubs probably still overall lack the confidence of reaching out, to organisations and to educational settings. It's kind of like, they might not know about us, or we might get a no. But what I'm hearing there is that you guys can be that link, can't you? You can be that bridge between, a club wanting to, get involved more in education and helping schools out, and you guys already having the contacts with active partnerships and school sports partnerships, and being able to connect the two, really. So just rounding up, I mean, everybody wants to do something that they enjoy. So kind of like my last kind of point really is like, do you have any advice on kind of how to foster a positive environment within your club or club events? Because obviously that would be a massive thing to, first of all, retain people of any age really, but to kind of spread the word of mouth that this is an activity I enjoy, and you should get involved too. So just wondering if you had any insight to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you say, when people are enjoying their sports, they're telling people about it, and therefore that's that word of mouth, and then you're getting more people coming and joining your club because you've got that reputation of being that club that has such a positive reputation. So, you know, when we talk about creating that positive environment, we're also looking at things like making sure it's accessible for everyone. So different abilities, but also people from different community groups as well. And also looking at those protected characteristics. So we really encourage clubs to really recognise the communities around them, who's in the local area, who aren't they reaching, understanding how welcoming their environment actually is. Some of the Sport Welfare Network are actually Buddle tutors in so that they can deliver training from Buddle, and one of them is around creating a positive environment. And it helps them to really reflect on that question: how welcoming is your club to different communities? So we really supported clubs to have those important conversations, not just with communities, but also people who have a real influence within their communities, so that they can also spread the word. And that's helped leaders too to understand how they can get feedback from both members and non-members, and how to make improvements based on what they've heard. From that feedback in the clubs, whether that's the coaches, club welfare officers, volunteers. So in practical terms, we've worked with clubs around, so for women, changing rooms and toilet facilities appropriate. Are their opinions valued? Are we just going off what we think's right? Are we actually getting their voice and putting action into place? You know, do they have equal opportunities? But also for other members as well, not just women, because that's applicable for everyone really, making sure that we are really listening to that voice and action in, not just listening to tick a box, but making sure we're putting action in place where we can. For different cultures, is there awareness of religious you know, celebrations and ways of life? Are we really thinking about that? For example, do they have does your club have prayer rooms or quiet spaces that people can access, so they don't feel awkward about asking about it? So again, getting that voice and really putting that into practice. Is there an environment where there's, you know, an open a sense of openness, where people feel that they're accepted for who they are, especially different communities like the LGBT community, and they being able to come and be exactly who they are and feel like they have to sort of shy away and pretend to be someone that they're not. Gender identity, respecting pronouns and supporting people again to be themselves. We also offer an active bystander training to clubs, and that's empowering them to use different methods to take action when they see discrimination, prejudice, poor conduct, so that everybody can play that part in maintaining that positive club culture, and understand that they've got a duty to do that as well, and it's not just the coach's responsibility or volunteers. Everybody who attends, everybody who's part of that community can help stamp out any again, prejudice, poor conduct. So we're encouraging our Orienteering members to take up that free workshop because it is available. So yeah, lots of different things there. Ultimately, making sure it's a place where everyone feels that they can be themselves, and that the sport is accessible for them, and that there's no barriers ultimately.
And that's the biggest thing, isn't it? Like, it's stripping away those barriers so that people, you know, feel that the sport's for them. You know, that's the only way that they're going to come and try it. And then hopefully, if they do come and try it, the clubs are putting on those positive experiences that you've just talked about, though. So apart from all of the fantastic things that you've talked about, and probably that we've not even touched really in this kind of short podcast, are there any kind of like external resources or signposting that you can kind of share with clubs, and that they can come to you for advice maybe, or a bit more information?
Yeah, there's a lot out there. It's just finding and what's relevant to maybe your club, and so it's been mentioned as Buddle. It can give ways of maybe to sort of how to governance your club. It could be ways that like safeguard. It can be raising funds. There's lots of different workshops across that. Play Their Way is a good resource where it fosters sort of the way that children play, or and be understand their youth voice, but give them a voice, choice and journey through the approach of that. There's other bits around safeguarding, the high-speed training, who is Dr. Paul Stewart. He provides a free safeguarding training course on his website. So anyone within a club who wants to sort of brush up on their skills, but it's not mandatory for a participant, let's say, or then they can do that. Ancraft Trust, NSPCC, good sources of information for not only clubs but parents as well. And what we'll do is we'll pass those links over, and then they can be distributed to the clubs, so they don't have to go searching too far for them. Hopefully, just into their emails, and they should have a nice bank of sort of resources and links to sort of propel them. But we are more than happy for people to contact us as sport welfare officers for advice, and we can point you in the direction of something that's not maybe safeguarding related, to signposting as well. So we do offer lots of different support streams to sort of build a club, but hopefully we can sort of take welfare to the next level and ensure that that clubs grow and sort of become the sort of a heartbeat of a community, and sort of see where that can sort of go to and what can be sort of made next into that.
I think you've kind of summed it up perfectly there, and I think hopefully this has been really useful for our clubs to first of all know that you guys exist, and not only that you exist, but you're there to help. Ultimately, aren't you? You're there to kind of share the burden, to upskill club members, volunteers, and ultimately, hopefully, fingers crossed, make the club a better place. And hopefully, if that all happens and it is a positive environment and it is welcoming, then that will only benefit the club in attracting more people to events, and ultimately possibly more members and possibly more volunteers. And there's only good things that can happen from doing all these things, and you guys are out there ready to listen, ready to help. So what we will do is we will add all of this information onto our webpage, our safeguarding webpage, where they can find out both this recording and information more about your roles, but also we'll add my email address onto there so that any clubs can contact me, and then I can put them in contact with you guys. But as we said, you literally cover every inch of the country, don't you? So even if a club's in Cornwall or Newcastle, it doesn't matter. There's a sport welfare officer out there to help, and is ready and waiting to help.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, no, thank you for having us. So yeah, bye from me.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.